Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko. If you're waiting for Doc Issues to chime in with, and I'm Dr. Issues. Sorry, folks, not going to happen this week. This is all me. I apologize to those of you who prefer Doc over myself. You have excellent taste, but be that as it may, since there's not a whole lot of back and forth in this episode, I told him he didn't really have to show up for this one. This is a special episode. As I had mentioned previously, I would be attending New York Comic Con, and in addition to all of the many books that I had signed and the cool art that I was able to look at and buy and bring in my wife and 6-month-old son. Yes, we brought Theo, and I will post some photos on the website and on social media. We got dressed up on Thursday and went as Ash, Misty, and Baby Pikachu. And yes, technically I know Baby Pikachu is a Pichu, but I was able to spend 3 days getting some interviews with creators. And let me tell you, folks, we've got some doozies lined up for you. So basically the way this is going to work is we're just going to have a little bit of brief background on each of the writers. And then we're just going to jump right into the interviews. And we're going to have, like I said, a little bit of bridging material, but no Doc this week. So it's just me talking to some comic creators. So this week and next episode are going to be filled with a variety of interviews and some really fascinating insight on some very famous characters, some slightly lesser known characters. You'll hear some familiar voices. Some friends of the show have chimed in, and I managed to meet up with them at New York Comic Con. Also, I apologize if I'm a little nasally in the bridging material, but I'm getting over a cold. Unfortunately, Theo got sick, and then being the wonderful, happy, loving, giving child that he is, decided to give it to mom and dad. So both my wife and I are dealing with a little bit of congestion and a bit of a cold. So I apologize if I'm a little nasally, but I'll be fine for next week. So the first interview here is also the first interview I was able to get. This is Cullen Bunn. Cullen is a fantastic guy. He wrote a portion of the Moon Knight series following the Warren Ellis run, and he most recently did the Moon Knight Annual, the Acts of Evil storyline, where Moon Knight squares off against Kang the Conqueror through time. And that was a really fun read. I know that our friends over at Into the Night podcast, the Moon Knight themed podcast, Ray and them gave it a fun review. So you should check that out if you are at all into the character of Moon Knight. And so that's primarily who Cullen and I spoke about. So take a listen to hear some of his thoughts on the Lunar Legionnaire. Anthony Sitko here with Capes on the Couch, and I'm here with writer Cullen Bunn. Cullen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, man, I'm happy to do it.
So, Cullen, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you have currently going on right now? I know you just finished the Moon Knight Annual, and we're going to be talking about Moon Knight in a little bit, but what other projects have you got in store for us?
Well, I've been working on a lot more creator-owned stuff, so I'm focusing pretty heavily on a lot of creator-owned books. I've got a book coming out from Dark Horse called Manor Black. I'm doing Unearthed with Image Comics, and then I've got a lot of other creator-owned books that haven't been announced yet in the works. And then I'm also doing some stuff with Valiant, also for a couple of unannounced projects. So.
Okay, well, just on a side note, when do you think we'll be able to find out more about those projects?
You know, that's a great question. I think by the end of the year, at least a couple of more will have been announced of the creator-owned things. But I'm not sure when Valiant plans on announcing the other projects.
All right, excellent. So primarily we're going to be talking about Moon Knight a little bit today, and we had previously covered Moon Knight in one of our earlier episodes. Marc Spector is a character who's clearly gone through a lot in his life, CIA, mercenary, etc., and then resurrected from the dead by Khonshu. Your run followed up on the Wood, Smallwood, and obviously the Ellis runs. What were some of the aspects of the character that you wanted to primarily focus on when you were writing him?
Well, one of the things that has always interested me about Moon Knight is this question of faith. I mean, he's a priest of Khonshu, So I wanted to really lean into what his faith might be and what that might look like. And then I also wanted to leave readers with a bit of a question of if it's all real or not. Is anything he's dealing with real, or is it all part of some delusion that Moon Knight has?
Well, I do know that that's been a big question that's been going back and forth, and depending on the writer, the issue of whether or not Khonshu is a legitimate entity or, as you said, just some sort of apparition. And I know that when in the Acts of Evil story was completed, a lot of readers felt that leaned very much, at least from their perspective, that Khonshu was much more real than had been previously portrayed. And I don't know if that was something that you were intending to portray, but what were some of your thoughts about that?
I think that's interesting. I was just at another convention over the weekend, and the guy said that he was really glad to see a book where Khonshu was portrayed as real, and that we saw all these other Moon Knights and how they all existed in other times. And I said, really? Are you 100% sure he was real? Are you 100% sure any of those Moon Knights were real? So there, I think that it's okay to have that question. One of the nice things about this character is that some people can read it and read it straight and just say, hey, this is Moon Knight dealing with deity and dealing with other versions of Moon Knights throughout time. And some people can read it and say, oh, no, none of that is real. It's all in his head. And I will say that there was a time in writing that book that I think it was much more clear, that I had written a version of that where it was very clear that all of it was in his head. But I decided to change all that.
Interesting. What made you make that decision to change it?
I thought it'd be more interesting to have people guess and debate about it. I think more people think that I was just saying, yeah, Khonshu was real and he's a deity. And maybe I am. I don't know.
Now, in the Acts of Evil storyline, no major spoilers, but Kang and Moon Knight battle through time, and it's evident that Kang is trying to acquire a number of items, and he's always being stopped by some priest of Khonshu, because no matter when he goes in time, there is always a priest of Khonshu. There is always some version of a Moon Knight waiting for him. What made you decide to choose the time periods that you selected and the versions of Moon Knight, or the versions of the priests of Khonshu that you selected for the story?
Well, we only got to spend a panel or two with some of them, and I really wanted to lean into the ones that I thought would be the most visually interesting. So that's why there's a pirate, and that's why there's a Viking, and the gladiator. It's like, these would be great to see portrayed in some cool fashion. Look, I would love for there to be a Moon Knight League book, at some point where it's all these Moon Knights working on a team together. That would be a wonderful book to work on. So yeah, it's also, I was just like, I just want a bunch of cool Moon Knights. What are the coolest ones? And my favorite was the World War II Moon Knight. I love the idea of a Moon Knight and Silver Company. I would love to write a book about a World War II era Moon Knight dealing with a team, his own Howling Commandos-like group.
Well, I'm part of several Moon Knight fan groups on Facebook and through various forms of social media, and I think the idea of that would be very enticing to a large number of our groups. Going back to your original run, did you ask to be put on Moon Knight when you were writing him in the regular book, or were you assigned to it? What was that process like?
So on the original run, it was really... So here's the interesting thing is, years ago, before I even had... Before my first indie work had been published officially, I did a pitch session with Marvel, and the pitch I sent them was for a Moon Knight, or the pitch I gave them while I was in that session was for Moon Knight. Now that didn't happen. Years later, it was a call. The editor of the book gave me a call and said, hey, we want you to write 5 issues of Moon Knight, and would you be interested, and what would you do with it? And that was how it came. I said, well, I want to do 5 standalone stories. And I want to kind of do a little darker, a little weirder, more macabre version, because the version I pitched years ago was called the Macabre Moon Knight. That was the pitch. And it was all sort of Moon Knight dealing with supernatural threats. And I kind of thought back to, when he, was fighting werewolves and things like that. So I wanted more of a supernatural Moon Knight. Not that he was supernatural so much as he was dealing with a lot of supernatural issues.
So one of the key aspects of Moon Knight, obviously, is the multiple personalities. You've got Marc, Jake, Steven. What is your favorite, personality or aspect of Marc Spector to write or to work on?
That's a tough one. It's, I like mercenary Marc Spector a little more. I like the tough guy Marc, who's in almost over his head when it comes to his religion, to the religion of Khonshu and to his faith.
That's a very interesting answer. And last question, Marvel announced that we've got a Moon Knight series coming up on Disney+. Obviously, those of us Moon Knight fans are very excited. What aspects of the character do you think that are going to be addressed, or would you like to see addressed in the show?
I'd really like them to lean into the sort of the weirdness of Moon Knight. Moon Knight's a weird character, and I think I'd like to see a lot of that mixed in with a sort of a grounded crime story.
Very fascinating. Thank you so much, Cullen. We appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the convention. So that was a fun interview. Like I said, really fun guy, great to talk to. So this next interviewee, I've been going to Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con now for, I think, 9 years, at least 8 years. And in that time, I have met dozens, if not hundreds, of creators, artists, writers, inkers, colorists, etc. And I don't think I've ever had a bad interaction, but the vast majority of them are go up, "Hi, I'm Anthony. I love your work. Thank you so much. You do amazing work. Can I get an autograph? Can I buy some art or whatever?" Da 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 da. And we exchange pleasantries, and that's that. So I've never had a bad interaction, but the overwhelming majority of my interactions with creators have been polite. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, there's not a whole lot of time. And I understand they're meeting hundreds of people over the course of a weekend. They're there to make money. They're there to sell their stuff. And so they don't have time to delve into a lot of the really meaty interactions. But this next interviewee, Howard Mackie, is one of the nicest people I've ever met at a convention. He is the creator of Danny Ketch, the second Ghost Rider, or third, I guess, technically, if you include the Phantom Rider. And he co-wrote a lot of the Clone Saga for Spider-Man. So he created Kane and Ben Reilly. And say what you will about those characters and what your thoughts are on how they interacted with Peter Parker and the whole Clone Saga as a story in general. But Howard Mackie is one of the nicest people in the industry. Warm, friendly, very generous with his time, and has some fantastic stories. And this is absolutely one of my favorite interviews that I've done over the course of the weekend. And so I'm very excited to bring you this exclusive interview that I had with Howard Mackie, the creator of Danny Ketch. Anthony Sitko here from Capes on the Couch, and I'm here with Howard Mackie, the creator of Danny Ketch, among many other characters. Howard, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Oh, my pleasure.
So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the, obviously aside from Danny Ketch, what are some of the other characters that you've worked on or had a hand in creating?
Well, I actually have been writing comics for about 35 years, so the list of characters I created is way too long to say, but the most notable ones are Dan Ketch and all of the supporting characters and villains in my run of Ghost Rider, which I did for about 7 years, but then also into the Spider-Man universe. I was heavily involved in the Clone Saga, and I co-created Ben Reilly, Kane, and many others there.
That's right. I had forgotten about that momentarily. So let's talk about Danny Ketch. Was the inspiration for the character your idea, or did Marvel say we want a new Ghost Rider and give you free reign? How did that work?
Well, Marvel knew that I was a longtime Ghost Rider fan, the original Ghost Rider series. And they were I had started my writing career, and they were looking to bring the Ghost Rider concept back. And so I was asked to submit a proposal about Ghost Rider. And immediately the caveat I was given was, we want this, but it can't involve Johnny Blaze, which kind of irritated me because that was the character that I wanted to write. And they said, no, you have to create a new character, should be somebody younger. And those were the parameters. And I went off, and that's when I came up with Danny Ketch. And Danny was really good. It's the old maxim of writing, write what you know. So all of that series took place in and around Cypress Hills, Brooklyn, and the cemetery. Well, that's where I grew up. I mean, I grew up directly across the street from the cemeteries in Brooklyn. So I just kept drawing for my life as I was populating that corner of the Marvel Universe.
Excellent. So now, what aspects of Danny? You said write what you know, and you mentioned briefly before we got started that Danny is very similar to you. In what respects did you say is Danny similar to you?
Well, I mean, everything from his voice to his mannerisms. I was just giving the new writer a couple of pointers about what his favorite alcohol would be and other things. But Dan was raised by a single mom in Brooklyn. My dad died when I was 7 years old. I have more than one sister, and none of my sisters were killed by a supervillain. But primary thing would be the relationship with he and his mom, I think, or similar to mine with my mom, or it was an idealized version of what I wanted the relationship with me and my mom to have been. So yeah, I was working out a lot of issues on the pages of those Ghost Rider comics, and I could go into way more detail about that, but I'll let you ask your questions.
Well, thank you. That's very interesting, that you bring that up, because there's so many characters that have close relationships, and then there's, I would say, even more characters that have strained relationships with families. And so why don't you talk a little bit more about how you felt that Danny's relationship with his mom was idealized compared to your own?
Well, as I said, I mean, when we're writing a work of fiction, even from the names, I populated the book with new characters. Somebody taught me early on, never name a character directly after somebody you know or love, because eventually you're not going to have control over that character, and somebody could turn a hero into a villain or kill somebody or whatever. So frequently you mix and match. But more to the point, as I said, my dad died when I was 7. My mom had a bit of an alcohol issue, and she was capable of being the super mom, the idealized TV version of a 1950s mom, and then a blackout drunk. And so I like to think that the mom that I was creating for Danny and Barbara, she didn't have the alcoholism issue, because I preferred to leave that aside in my memories about my mom. I'm aware of it, which is why I am very careful about my own alcohol consumption. So that it was more about that. That I like to think that Danny's mom did her best to nurture. And my mom did too. It just sometimes she failed. And I like to think that I wrote it in such a way that Danny's mom did not fail as often, but circumstances around were pretty horrific.
Very fair point. Moving on, so his origin, obviously very tragic, as many characters often are. What baggage do you think that Danny was carrying forward throughout that? Because he got his powers, but at the same time he remembers, such a horrific incident, sort of helping to unleash that, as many characters are. So what baggage do you think that he carried forward from that?
Oh, a lot. Because, it is a classic, certainly Marvel superhero origin to have well, and then, on the other end, there's Batman and even Superman, the entire death of his entire race until they found others. But with Danny, it would always have to be a motivating factor, and especially since he was a spirit of vengeance, there was always that motivating factor in the background. It was vengeance. Was it vengeance against the people that did this to his sister, or was it vengeance against himself for not being able to protect his sister at that moment and for coming through the other side unscathed?
So what were some of the biggest things that you came up with in terms of trying to differentiate the characterization of Danny as opposed to Johnny Blaze? Obviously, you said you're a big Ghost Rider fan prior to that, and Johnny is obviously an iconic character. What did you do to create Danny so that he was different from Johnny while still retaining that familiar Ghost Rider vibe?
Well, I think with Blaze in particular, I chose, when I was able to bring him back into the book, to explore exactly what it would be like to have lived with everything that he went through, to have the Hellfire eating him from the inside out. And the interesting thing is, I think I just read the new version of Ghost Rider that's out, and they switched the roles a little bit, and I liked that. Blaze, and I don't want to give anything away, in his own way is more settled in what he has become, and Dan is struggling right now because of events that have occurred in his life. But back then, I brought Blaze in to be the mentor, to basically say, don't let yourself go down the path that I've gone down. And my run of Ghost Rider was, I think, ultimately about Danny struggling with maintaining the Danny part of him while still having, the spirit of vengeance eating away at him from inside. Just as a side note, and it took me years to realize this myself, when I started writing Ghost Rider, and that's a key part. It's about the demon that I think many of us have inside of us. In Danny and in Blaze, it got to manifest itself. But at that time, I was going through my own issues, one of which was I had cancer at the time, and I realized that that's what it felt like to me. The cancer felt like I had this demon inside of me. And so there was always that awareness and struggle, but I also did deal with some issues of depression and anxiety at the time. And I think that I was literally working my demons out on the page of Ghost Rider at the time in a way that I didn't realize.
That is a fascinating intake to make that correlation between the cancer and the demon inside. That is absolutely fascinating. Where would you have liked had the run continued? I think it was 93 or so issues that it was thereabouts.
I didn't go that far. I was off of it for a couple of years before it was canceled.
Oh, okay. So the other character that I want to talk to you about is, you mentioned Ben Reilly and Kane. Now you created Danny Ketch, who was a successor of sorts to Johnny Blaze, and then you created Ben Reilly and Kane, obviously the Clone Saga affiliated with Spider-Man. What were some of the characterization choices that you made for Ben as compared to distinguish him from Peter Parker?
Well, I co-created. I mean, there were a number of other writers. Mostly Terry Cavanaugh and I co-created both Ben Reilly and Kane with the artists. And for me, the fascinating part was you take two characters who are the same up until a certain point, and then you split them off, and then, it's the nature-nurture argument. They've now experienced two separate lives. And with Ben Reilly, it was, what if he went off and then didn't have the burden, quite frankly, the original Peter Parker Spider-Man had. What if he wasn't having to deal with great power comes great responsibility on his every single waking moment? Could he have a life? And and then we had several writers, all of whom explored it in their own ways. With Kane, we got to go in a completely different direction. Is that he was the guy that, forget about the stuff corrupting him from inside out. He was just being corrupted all the way through, and he projected that out on himself. He was in pain all the time, physically and emotionally, and he wanted to transfer that pain to as many people as possible. And so for me, as a writer, it was an interesting exploration of human psyche, especially when you're starting out with the same base for all of the characters, and then to see where they go from there.
Excellent. I think that is certainly a fascinating point in looking at divergence, and I believe that was explored in a Marvel series, For Want of a Nail or something along those lines.
I was not involved in that, but yes, yeah.
It was. It's always a fascinating idea to think about. And I guess that's just about going to wrap it up. Are you currently working on any projects right now? I
am, but I'm not at liberty to tell. I am actually busier now than I have been in several years, and hopefully I'll be able to. I do have a project in the works with Marvel right now, so maybe next year you come back and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Excellent. I look forward to it. Well, Howard, Mackie, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
My pleasure.
Great stuff. Like I said, just such a warm guy, and to hear the way that he was able to bring so much of his own personal story into Danny and turn it for the better, almost the idealized version of the relationship that he wished he had with his mother, and his demons with cancer and all of the situations that he dealt with. And that was a recurring theme that I noticed a lot of times speaking to the writers, that they bring a portion of themselves into the story because it makes it more relatable to the reader. It certainly makes it more relatable to them writing it. And I think Danny is a fantastic character. And I thoroughly enjoyed the issue 1 of the new Ghost Rider by Ed Brisson. So that is about Danny Ketch. So he's being brought back into the spotlight. And I managed to meet Ed and get him to sign it. I tried to get an interview with Ed to talk to him about Danny and his take on Danny versus Howard's. Unfortunately, Ed was very busy with panels and such, and unfortunately, we couldn't connect. Maybe at some point later on down the line, I'll get an opportunity to speak with him and we can go a little more in depth. Because that was the other thing that I noticed throughout my interviews is I was really only able to get about 10 minutes or so with each creator because obviously they're very busy. They are at Comic-Con. They're not there to talk to me. They're there to meet fans, make money, and, sell whatever it is that they're selling. So I understand, and I was incredibly grateful to get the time that I was able to get with any of these creators. So the fact that Ed Brisson was busy and didn't have the panels, I do not hold it against any of the creators or any of the writers who were not able to sit down and talk to me. So I'm grateful for all the time that I was able to get. Like the 10 minutes I was able to get with this next writer. I'm a big fan of her husband's work. I've got 2 commissioned pieces by David Finch hanging up in my office. Both of them involve Moon Knight. I know you're all shocked. But Meredith Finch is quite a capable creator in her own right. And I don't think it's entirely fair that she's sometimes known as just David Finch's wife. I think she does great work on her own and it can certainly stand on its own merits. And so here is a chat that I had with Meredith about comparing and contrasting 2 major characters that she's worked on, Wonder Woman and Xena, Warrior Princess. So check this out. This is my chat with Meredith Finch. This is Anthony Sitka with Capes on the Couch, and I'm here with comic book writer Meredith Finch. Meredith, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks.
Before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you've worked on and some of the characters that you've helped to write?
I've done Wonder Woman for DC, I've done a Catwoman story for DC, I've written Conan for Marvel, and Valeria from the Conan universe for Marvel. That's still coming out. I've done a couple of creator-owned books, Rose through Image, The Light Princess through Cave Pictures Publishing, The Little Mermaid, and some horror stuff through Zenescope. So Xena through Dynamite. I've been all over the place.
So Wonder Woman, I think, is one of the most iconic characters in comic book history, and you had, quite a run on her. What were some of the aspects of Wonder Woman that you really wanted to get across in your storytelling?
For me, when I was writing Wonder Woman, I really identified with her as a woman trying to balance all the different plates that were spinning in her life. And I felt like as a mother, I could really relate to that. Just working and then balancing the kids and everything that needs to be done. And she was in that situation in her storyline where she was Superman's girlfriend and her mother, the queen of Themyscira, had been turned into stone, so she had to become the queen for a period of time. Plus she was the Justice League, and I just felt like she had so much going on, and she had discovered that she was a god, the daughter of Zeus, that I just felt like, how would you balance all of that? And so I really tried to look at her from an every woman's point of view versus a superhero point of view.
And I do think definitely as a woman that you brought a different perspective to the writing. I think, not that it's good or bad, but I think men tend to write Wonder Woman a little differently than women do because of that shared understanding. What were some of your experiences that you were able to bring into creating the story and creating the character of Diana?
I think right around the time I was writing her, a girlfriend of mine had a very tragic accident, ended up breaking her neck. And I think I used a lot of the pain that I was feeling from that to sort of channel into how she would have felt seeing her mother broken and that kind of struggle, and then still having to put on a face or a facade, because there are people that still count on you and need you to be there for them, and you can't fall apart. So how are the ways that you can manage that? And then I also wanted to show that there are times where she does fall apart, and there's a moment in our story where she kind of allows all of those things that have been building on her to get the better of her and acts in a way that is maybe out of character for her. But I think we all have those moments, and it's how you recognize it and deal with it and move on from it that speaks to who you are as a person and to her as a character.
Wonder Woman obviously is traditionally written, and you're certainly part of that pantheon as a character of good and of love and of justice. And she's certainly one of the most hopeful characters. But that is, as you said, it's also a burden to be able to present that all the time. What were some of the ways in which you showed how that burden impacted her of constantly having to do the right thing and be that loving and good hero?
Well, I think we had a moment where people have been taken in by alien creatures, and she has, when they finally come across these alien creatures, she has this sort of breakdown where she just reacts in a very violent, un-Wonder Woman-like way. And I think that's we really tried to show it as a reflection of this tremendous love that she has for humanity, and to see people treated in this way and the horror of it causes her to act in a way that maybe is not super or wonderful, but is very human and real.
Were there any stories or ideas that you had for Wonder Woman that you weren't able to get across in your story arcs, either through space, time, where you moved on to another project? Is there anything that you haven't had a chance to tell through Diana yet?
I felt like I got to say a lot of what I wanted to say. And then I think there are things that you want to say maybe about ideas of love and forgiveness, which I was able to say in other stories and use, like my creator-owned book, Rose, through Image. I was able to use that story as a means to sort of get across things that maybe I couldn't say necessarily because of the constraints of the Wonder Woman universe and working for a major publisher. When it's your own project, you can kind of shape it the way you want to shape it. So there are always ways, even if you don't get to tell the story that you, or do everything you want to do with a character, there are always ways to get your ideas and your stories out there.
Another character that you've worked on is Xena, who in some ways is almost like a modern version. There's a lot of corollaries between Xena and Wonder Woman. What were some of the things that you got to say through Xena that maybe she would do that Wonder Woman wouldn't do?
Well, she doesn't hold back at all, right? Like, Wonder Woman's coming from a place of love. That's not really where Xena's coming from. You know, she's coming from a place of doing what needs to be done. And she isn't constrained by killing people, where Wonder Woman really doesn't kill anybody. So you're able to take that character and really explore it in a way that, I would say an uninhibited way to sort of say, take it to the next level, like explore what would you do if you felt this way and you didn't have the constraints of being a member of the Justice League, which Xena can just do. There's no one to step in Xena's way. She can do who she is, and she does. But I think it also makes her a more powerful character because she really is constrained by herself and only herself. So, you know, you see a more human battle a lot of times in making the right decision. And that's why she has Gabrielle, too. She's that balancing force to rein her in a little bit.
Now tell us a little bit about Rose. And I'm going to be perfectly honest that I'm not exactly familiar with the character. I apologize for that. But can you give me a little bit of a background on Rose and sort of who she is and what is her force? What is her raison d'etre, I suppose?
Sure. Rose, really, I've always said, is my love story to fantasy fiction. It's what I grew up reading. And the main essence of her character is love. I felt like there was a lot of things, like I said, with Wonder Woman that I wasn't able to or couldn't say in the writing of that character. And I used Rose as a means to do that. It's a story of a young girl who lives in a kingdom that's ruled by a tyrannical queen, and she discovers that she's the last of the magical beings in her kingdom, and she has to find another creature who is also the last of his kind. He's a giant cat, and only together, they're like the yin to the yang for each other, and it's only together and ultimately through a sacrifice that they're able to defeat the queen and save the kingdom.
Sounds like a very fascinating story. Now, is this YA? Is this for teens, all ages? What is the age range, I suppose?
I would say we were shooting for young adult to teens. There's no violence on the page. Everything, if there is violence, is off the panel. So we tried hard to make it maybe a more mature young adult. Everybody has. I always say there's nothing worse than you would see on the cover of a Vogue magazine.
Fair enough. So I guess the last question, what is next for you? What is the next project that you're working on? Do you have anything that is in the works or that you can announce, etc.?
Sure. I have a project coming out next year through K Pictures Publishing, another one with them called Fantasties. It's an adaptation of the George MacDonald book, And I have a creator-owned project that will be coming out next spring called The Book of Ruth, which I'm kickstarting November 1st. So, and then I'm just kind of playing around, see what I want to do next, thinking about it. I have 3 kids, so they always keep me busy.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Meredith. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to me. I appreciate it.
Great stuff, and I am definitely interested in checking out some of her creator-owned work, and that was a recurring theme. Again, another recurring theme that I noticed with a lot of the writers that I was talking to, that they not only do work for the big 2, but they do a lot of work for indie, smaller publishers, and some more creator-owned stuff. Speaking of creator-owned stuff, this next writer that I was able to interview, I finally got to meet face-to-face. You may remember our interview several months ago with Jeremy Whitley, who worked on The Unstoppable Wasp, and he is writing the Future Foundation. Well, we got a chance to finally catch up with Jeremy and meet him face-to-face and talk mostly about Future Foundation, because we just recently did the episode on The Maker, who is the primary villain in the Future Foundation run, but also some of his creator-owned stuff like Princeless and Raven and so on. So it was really cool just to get a chance to reconnect with him in person and talk to him. So here is our interview, my interview with Jeremy Whitley. Anthony Sitko here at New York Comic Con, and I'm here with friend of the show, Jeremy Whitley. Jeremy, so good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you too.
It's nice to finally meet you face to face. I know last time we chatted over Skype, and now how's the con going for you so far?
Oh, it's going great. It's such a huge and busy con. I couldn't be bored if I tried.
Fair enough, fair enough. So when we spoke, last time we spoke, you were finishing up your run on Unstoppable Wasp, and you were going to be moving on to Future Foundation. So I haven't really had a chance to talk to you then. I'm loving the book, definitely thoroughly enjoying where the story is going. Unfortunately, I wish it could have gone on for longer. But we just did an episode on The Maker, who I think is a very fascinating character and certainly an interesting take on Reed Richards. Was that a character that you wanted to put in the book, or was that someone that Marvel editorial said, we want you to, have the Future Foundation interact with the Maker? What was the situation behind that process?
That was sort of a conversation between us about what we wanted the big conflict in the book to be, who we thought would be a good villain for the Future Foundation, and I think it was initially either Tom Brevoort or C.B. Cebulski's idea for using him. And I just thought it was a fantastic idea, because you have these kids who have sort of grown up as the proteges of our Reed Richards, the 616 version, and to have them, facing off against this dastardly version of their own, father figure in the story it makes for a fun twist.
And then the introduction of Ricky Barnes into the story, was that another conversation, or was that your idea?
That was all my idea. I love Ricky. I loved the stuff Sean McKeever did with her back with Young Allies, and then Girl Without a World. She'd always been a character that I'd like to write. I wanted to bring in at some point, and her sort of tie to all this stuff with Franklin, I thought was an interesting way to bring her into this story and have a unique element that would sort of define this version of the Future Foundation as opposed to the previous volumes, because I love her a lot, and I got to do a little playing with continuity to fix some stuff with her and put some interesting bits in there.
Now, back to The Maker, one of the things that we discussed when Doc Issues and I analyzed The Maker is the fact that he's really not all that different from the 616 Reed, other than the fact that he's just sort of had a bad go of things, and rather than taking it in stride, he makes a hard left turn and goes villainous. What is some of the things that you like from a character perspective about The Maker, and what are some of the ways that you write him?
I like that he has the same amount of potential as Reed Richards. I think we highlighted a lot in issue 2 specifically that they've had very different lives despite being essentially the same person in different worlds. He had a much rougher childhood. He had a much different experience with becoming part of the Fantastic Four. He's younger at the point it happens, and he has a lot more fallout with Sue instead of having the sort of long, prosperous relationship that our Reed and Sue has had. They kind of fall apart, and Sue ends up with Ben over there. And it's a real, I feel like, sort of a sliding doors kind of thing of like, this is who Reed Richards could be if he didn't have this grounding and love of, family, both his actual kids and wife, but also, people like Johnny and Ben and the rest of the Marvel Universe who love Reed and are part of his life. It's very different than the way the Maker's life has gone, and I feel like you see our Reed and you see like things could have been very different for him. They both have the same sort of drive and determination and single-mindedness that they get a hold of a problem and they won't let it go. But our Reed has slightly different boundaries of where he's willing to go to fix those problems.
I definitely like the sliding doors reference. During the episode, I made a reference to almost the killing joke, where in the sense that it was, Reed became the Maker, almost like the Joker was trying to have Commissioner Gordon after a bad day, that anybody was possible of falling. But the sliding doors reference, I think, works even better. Another interesting character that's in the Future Foundation is Julie Power, and I feel that she's almost used as like a point of view character for the reader. Was that sort of how you intended on writing her, that because she joins the team in the first issue, that it's sort of written around her, giving the background to the audience and on who the Future Foundation is in the history of Power Pack?
Yeah, I think I wanted to have a character who was being introduced new, who was a character I like. I love Julie Power. I've loved her for a while, all the way back from Avengers Academy and her appearances in Runaways and Loners and stuff like that. And bringing her into the team was something I very much wanted to do, and it gave me the option of having her be sort of point of view, sort of this point of like, oh, here's where the story starts, is when Julie comes in. And also, that she's got sort of this branching history with Alex. They haven't seen each other for a while, and they've both changed quite a bit since the last time they were in the same place. So I like having that sibling relationship, while at the same time having them sort of figuring out who each other are now. Because, they've, for Alex, it's been even longer, because he's been, sort of out discovering the universe. Time has passed quicker for him. Having them rediscover that dynamic and having Julie be sort of the person who can help Alex fix everything and bring the team together the way they need to. So it was a really fun idea for me, and I feel like it came together nicely. And thanks to her last few appearances in Runaways, Julie has some baggage of her own that is interesting to deal with, and that we can talk about for her character as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that she's almost a study in contrast for the Maker when it comes to heartbreak, whereas the Maker, Ultimate Reed gets his heart broken and decides that this world isn't worth saving, and I'm going to go out and try and find a new one and burn this one to the ground. Julie sort of comes around to it. Initially, we find her and she's doing the young girl, horrible post-breakup, eating the ice cream and watching the TV, but she eventually comes around to it. And so I find that contrast in the heartbreak to be very interesting between Maker and Julie. And I don't know if that was something intentional or that was just something that sort of worked out.
I think, honestly, it just more sort of worked out in the end. Because I wanted to explore a little bit of Julie as far as psychology. Having superheroes deal with real-life stuff like being depressed after a breakup is important to me, because those are the sort of things that real people reading the comic really have to worry about overcoming. They don't often have to fight off Galactus, but to have a hero that's sure, she's incredibly fast and she's very good at being a hero, but she still has to deal with the fallout of this bad breakup and to some extent a worse relationship, and try to figure out how to move forward from there, and is not immediately able to do it, is important for people to see. To me, I think that's what makes Marvel characters what they are, is that outside of their powers, they're real people. They go to college and have bad breakups and have to deal with being depressed, even though they can fly at the speed of light.
The last thing I want to talk about is one of the key themes that I took away, at least from the first couple issues of Future Foundation, is the notion of family. Obviously, you have the Power siblings, and then the Future Foundation, in and of themselves, is a sort of family. It's can be a little bit dysfunctional at times, but they ultimately still all rallied together. Was that a theme that you were intending to maintain throughout the book? And I would very much like to have seen where it would have continued to go had we potentially gotten more issues, but I'm still curious to see where it goes right up until the issue 5. But was that something that you were intending on creating?
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see where it had gone too, but I think that's the notion of found family, especially to me, is very important, and I think that's something that Fraction and Allred's run of Future Foundation hit very heavily on, and is something I like to explore more as we go, because I think that's the Future Foundation. They're brilliant, but a lot of them are, especially in the Moloids case, actual rejects. They're people turned their back on them, and they found this new world and new family to be part of, and it's sort of and allows them to be part of these magnificent stories and new adventures, and those have always been stories that have really rung true to me. Be it Future Foundation or X-Men or Wasp, where we have our own little family of AIM girls and Nadia finding Janet, even though they're not really blood related. Having this very mother-daughter relationship.
I was just about to say that it seems to be the notion of found family is very much a recurring theme throughout your books. Where I was going to reference the Wasp, and from what I can tell, Princeless as well seems to be very much a theme of found family. It seems to be recurring throughout your books. So I guess my next question is then, what's next for Jeremy Whitley? What next projects are you working on? What have you got lined up for us?
Well, obviously, we've got 2 more months of Future Foundation. Those are all written and coming out. And honestly, I'm not sure how much more I can talk about it. I think almost everything else I have coming up is still sort of a secret. So I guess we'll talk about it as it comes up. But there's definitely more stuff coming from me.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for once again taking the time, Jeremy, and we will continue to promote the Future Foundation and all your continuing projects. And thank you again for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Good stuff as always from Jeremy. Great guy, and I'm sure whatever his next project is, we will be happy to talk to him about that. Seated next to Jeremy is our final interviewee of the day, and this was a big one. This one I had to schedule well in advance, and she was very busy, but gracious enough to give me 10, 15 minutes of her time. I am talking about one of the most active Twitterers, I think, on the platform, Gail Simone. Now, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or some other major podcatcher, you're not going to be able to hear the entire interview. And that is because we have decided, as a special feature to our patrons, to make the entire interview with Gail Simone a Patreon exclusive. So we're going to give you the beginning of the interview with Gail. But if you want to hear the whole thing, go to patreon.com/capesonthecouch. You can subscribe for as little as $1 per month. We'll give you a shout out, and you can unlock the entire uncensored interview. Normally we have a lot of tiers, and $5 gets you the uncensored content, and $3 gets you early access, etc. For this, and we have another big interview in next week's episode. They will be unlocked for all patrons at the $1 level. This is a sort of little, I guess this is the hook to draw you in. So if you are a patron of ours, many, many thanks to you for supporting the show, for continuing to support the show. And your reward is the full unedited, well, edited for time and ums and ahs, but the full uncensored exclusive interview with Gail Simone. So if it cuts out a little early, or if you'd like to hear the whole thing, go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/capesonthecouch, and subscribe. Show some love to the show. It's a fascinating interview. And we also want to make sure that we give a plug to her new book that she is working on, 7 Days, which is part of the Catalyst Prime universe. It's an indie book. So I had no knowledge of any of the characters going in, and I was immediately hooked. And as you'll hear in the interview, it's something that I am definitely going to be adding to my pull list, and I'm more intrigued by the characters. So check out our exclusive interview with Gail Simone. All right, Anthony Sitko here at New York Comic Con, and I'm here with the legendary Gail Simone. Gail, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh, hey, thank you for having me. This is such an interesting concept for a podcast. It's awesome.
So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about 7 Days? This is your new project that you're working on, and why don't you tell us a little bit, at least as much as you can, without spoiling it for the audience.
Okay, well, 7 Days is something that I'm really excited about. We've been working on it for a year, and number 1 finally came out this week on New Comic Book Day. So number 1's here, yay! And basically what it's about is a superior being comes down to Earth and announces to the entire world that his planet is dead, and he's taking ours, and he's going to kill every living thing on it. But he's not a complete monster. You have 7 days to say your goodbyes and get your together and figure out how you want to spend your last days on Earth, and then it's all gone. And then each issue is 1 day in the 7 days, so there's 7 issues.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Capes on the Couch. Thank you again to all the creators who took the time to speak with me. Cullen Bunn, Howard Mackie, Meredith Finch, Jeremy Whitley, Gail Simone. Next week is part 2 of our New York Comic Con interview episode wrap-up, and Doc will be in on that one, and I will not sound like I've got a plug up my nose, God willing. Next week, we've got interviews with Al Ewing, writer of The Immortal Hulk, Saladin Ahmed, writer of Exiles, Quicksilver, Black Bolt, and Miles Morales. Erica Schultz, who we spoke to on the show. She has worked on Daredevil. She did 12 Devils Dancing, and she has a new book out. It's a Comixology exclusive. So we're telling all of our fans, go and check that out. I spoke to Robbie Thompson, who has worked on Silk, Meet the Skrulls, and a variety of other books. And ladies and gentlemen, next week, an interview that I never thought would be possible, that I never thought I would get. But if you followed us on social media while I was at New York Comic Con, you know that I was able to spend 15 minutes talking to the legendary writer, Chris Claremont. That's right, Mr. X-Men himself, the man most identified with some of the greatest stories, not only in Marvel history, not only in X-Men history, in comic book history. I was able to pick his brain for 15 minutes. That interview was very interesting, dare I say almost combative at times, because Chris is very opinionated about the characters that he has worked on and does not like some of the changes that have been made to them in the ensuing years since he worked on them. And just to give you an advance warning, much like Gail Simone in this episode, the full exclusive Chris Claremont interview will be available to our patrons. So if you want that, not only full interview, but if you want it early before it comes out, go to patreon.com/capesonthecouch. If you subscribe for at least $1, you will have access to the full Gail Simone interview and the full Chris Claremont interview. So that is our little draw for all of our patrons. And again, it's our way of saying thank you to the folks that have subscribed to the show and who have given your money to support the show and all of the efforts that we have made. So that is next week's episode. The following episode will be on Roy Harper. That's a patron request. And we will also have more information on our first ever live appearance. That will be at Rogue Comics in Cranford, New Jersey. We will have a date and time announced by next week. I promise you that. And last but not least, we will have information on a mega crossover, a mega podcast crossover event with us and 4 other shows that we will have full details on by next week. So you can check all of that out on our website at capesonthecouch.live. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, YouTube, basically all major podcatchers. If you are listening to us on a platform that allows you to like, rate, and review, please do so, and we will read your 5-star. We will read your 1-star review. If you don't like us, we will read that review anyway. But please leave us a 5-star rating and review if you like the show, because that's what gets us more listeners. We are available on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Capes on the Couch. You can email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com. Last but not least, please check out our website and all of our social medias to find our listener survey. We are still doing that for just a few more weeks. We will be doing a listener survey because we want to make sure that we make the best possible show for you, our fans. So that's going to wrap it up for me. Doc will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Anthony Sitko. We will see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.